Good day to you one and all. It is I, Justin Hawkins, and this is Justin Hawkins Rides Again. Yeah. So today I'm talking about the White Stripes, and very specifically the song called Seven Nation Army. It's that song that everybody sings all the time. If you're at a darts match and then, I don't know, somebody does a bullseye, they'll go, da, 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 bullseye. Or if it's like you're watching another kind of sport, like netball, and then somebody scores a netball goal, netball goal. They all go like that, and it's just synonymous with sporting events, any kind of gathering. At Glastonbury last week, there was Paolo Nutini was playing, and I'm told that people were going Paolo Nutini, and I just think it's like probably the most. Maybe it's the best riff that has emerged since the year 2000. What do you think about that theory? Yeah, it's the best riff. The best riff. Maybe it's one of the best riffs of all time. Anyway, it's the opening track on their fourth studio album called Elephant, and I'm going to talk about it right now. So here we go. Not just the riff, of course, the whole thing. Justin Hawkins rides again. So, yes, I met Jack White once actually at the MTV, what's it called, the VMAs, when it's the Video Music Awards. It's because I think our successful album came out in the same year. I think we even had the same man did our artwork as who did their artwork, and his name was Bruce Brand, and he worked for a company called Art Hole. Genius. I also think that year when they did Elephant, I think that album and Permission to Land were probably the two cheapest albums made to chart that year. I think ours cost about 20 grand, theirs was probably about the same, and they went on to be enormously successful. And of course our paths crossed. That's what happens in the music trade, and he seemed to be a lovely man, so it's going to be hard to be impartial, and I don't really need to say anything good or bad about this song. It is what it is. Fucking brilliant. It was recorded on guitar using an octave pedal. Now, this is something that always makes me laugh about the White Stripes. You sometimes hear people who have no idea what they're talking about going, oh, it's such a raw guitar sound. And it isn't a raw guitar sound. It's deeply affected. And that's because, that's a two-piece band making enough noise for, a 4 or 5 piece band, and a brilliant noise as well. A lot of that comes comes from the thought that he's put into how he uses his guitar, and of course the octave pedal is a big part of that. Let's watch a bit of it and then see what we make of it. So coincidentally, the key of it is basically E minor, I think. Which I did not expect that. It is in the same key as my theme tune, as luck would have it. And I'm talking to myself at night because I can't forget. So, it's such an iconic riff that there's really no reason for them to stray from it once the vocal starts. What I love about the verse melody is the way it develops in the second half. So it's like, and then it goes, and I think this is their fourth album, but Jack White as a songwriter has probably written, I don't know, what do you think, 200 songs by that point, maybe even more, maybe 1,000 songs, let's say that, if he's been writing since he was a child. But I think that kind of development of a melody where it goes off and does something else, it's the kind of instinctive thing that an experienced songwriter does anyway. But it also reminds me of like and then when that word up by Cameo develops in the same way in the second half of the melody, verse melody, it goes, wave your hands in the air like you don't care, fly by the people as they start to do your dance, you know, that, all that stuff. You know, it has the same kind of structure in a sense, you know, and it's also similar to the Cameo word up in the fact that it's a sort of descending motif on the second half as well, you know, so like that. Back and forth through my mind behind a cigarette. It's also really unusual to sort of get all the way up to the pre-chorus and only actually hear a bass. You know, it's pretty amazing. You could argue that it has a similar sort of dynamics to what like a 90s grunge song would have, but it doesn't really, because a 90s grunge song would give you a flavour of how powerful it's going to be by doing something really, really loud at the beginning before the singing even starts. These guys, it's just a bass and not even a full drum set, a bass drum. So it's super stripped down. And then when it hits you in the face at the pre-chorus, you know something big's coming. And then something big does come. It's the same motif, but played on a really loud guitar. It's fucking awesome. That is actually a bit that develops in terms of the riff itself. I think the sports enthusiasts, when they're singing that at the various sort of public gatherings that they attend, they just go like this. We are watching a sports match. They don't go, we are watching a nice sporting match, but that is how it develops. It goes, du-du-du-du. And that's the only thing that sort of sets it apart from what they're doing in the verse. It's a subtle difference, and you know, just makes it more interesting for repeat listens, I suppose. I do sometimes wonder if they had any sort of concept of how omnipotent and how, you know, enormously successful this thing was going to be. It's a great video. They probably spent a few quid on it, but they couldn't have imagined, could they? Would they have dared to dream? Maybe I'll get Jack White on one day and ask him the same question that every other interviewer has probably asked him since 2003. That one there. This is the pre-chorus. G, A, into the riff. And then at the end of the riff section, which doesn't really have any singing on it, does that again to prepare you for another drop down where it's just bass and drums. It couldn't be simpler. Actually, yeah, it really is an exercise in simplicity when it comes to, you know, the compositional arrangement. That's just a riff. I mean, it's not even, you wouldn't even describe that as an ostinato, although it is a repeating motif, because the key isn't changing, it's just this. And if I catch it coming back my way, I'm gonna serve it to you. I really love a lot of the later White Stripe stuff that came out after this, like the Icky Thump and all that stuff is brilliant. But what I love about this record is even like in the aesthetic that you see them, the way they dress, you know, like it's just a red t-shirt and some white trousers. They might switch that around occasionally, but it's an achievable look. Everything is just totally stripped down and pure. Can't argue with the authenticity of it. I mean, the only thing is there's some interesting stuff happening effectually with the guitars. But this is like, it's almost like they have a manifesto to keep everything simple. It's brilliant. Simple and brilliant. And that ain't what you want to hear, but that's what I'll do. But what is it about this song that means you never get bored of hearing it? How can something that simple never get annoying? I mean, aside from the obvious explanation, which is that it's genius. What is it? How have they done that? It's amazing. Use the comments section to suggest, please. Here's a slide solo. Probably the nearest thing to an overdub you're going to see on this, really. Obviously, when they play it live, I don't think there's anybody covering the bass. Well, it sounds like there's a bass and there's an electric guitar doing like the rhythm part and a slide solo happening over the top of it. So probably 2 overdubs in total, I would say. It doesn't even sound to my ears like they've got a stereo image on what would be the guitar part. Ordinarily, a rock or metal band would, you know, that it feels like they're all just major chords as well. But you're not hearing this note in there. So it's implied major, really. It might actually be minor. But you don't know that. You're only hearing like the root note, which is the E, and then the fifth, which is the B, making it a power chord. There's a million ways to play that. The only thing you don't want to do is have that or that poking out, and it adds some mystique to the riff, really, because you never really know if it's in major or minor. There's no accompanying sort of top melody to determine that for you, and no other harmonic information. So it really is just purely about the riff and the fifths. That's actually reminds me of the Ben-Hur soundtrack or something like that. You know, when you're only hearing fifths, it's really imposing, but it has a certain mystique as well, which you lose if you colour it in with that. You just don't need it. You're better off allowing your mind to paint it in. It means that every person who listens to this is going to have a slightly different interpretation of what these chords actually mean, which can either alienate or expand your audience. I think that's actually a pretty ballsy move, actually, to just have that. Certainly a deliberate choice, because he's obviously capable of playing a full-blooded chord if he needs to. He's a very, very good guitar player. So I suppose the clue could be here, because by that point you're in C. No clue. He's gone from, that's the root, which is the E, and then this bit here is the fifths of the C and B, which are the last 2 chords of the motif. So he's going, but that is only the fifth of that. So he just never gives it away. You never know if he's talking about. It's probably going to be this though. But I suppose the real mystique is here, and I think that he's probably one of those artists who, despite what you think you know about him, there's a whole lot more that you don't. I mean, I saw him on what's that film called? It Might Get Loud, when he was one of the 3 guitarists that were sort of talking about their influences and their own sort of catalogue from the perspective of being a guitar player. And even though he was sort of telling us things about his childhood and his upbringing and his musical origins, you still don't really know much about him. You know, he's definitely maintained that sort of elusive rock star who lives at the end of the road in a house with a big high fence, and nobody really knows that much about him, except for the fact that he's awesome and uncompromising. He's done great things for music as well. You think about like the record plant, the Third Man stuff that he's worked on, that's really in Detroit, and where's the other one? Probably Nashville. So I'm not really sure, to be honest, but he just does really great stuff, and I think he's one of the guys that you would say is keeping rock alive. Wouldn't you say that? Would you agree with that? I more or less love everything he's done, to be honest. I always say this thing about like there's no true rock and roller that plays one of those sort of guitars that do everything for you. You know, the ones with all the best electrics in, that you can stand in front of an amp and it won't scream at you. But I think he chooses to play guitars that are really difficult to get a good sound out of, and it sort of makes him work harder as a guitarist, and you can hear the sweat and the toil in a lot of his playing. I really respect that, because you know, there's always a temptation to try and do something impressive and you know, buy an instrument that allows you to do that more easily. He never does that. He's really just playing these shitty old guitars and making them sound like this. And I think the reason why his playing is so distinctive is because he has to work so hard to get anything like that to sound good. I think if anybody else picked up that guitar, it would be a shit show. But not when he does it. It's great. And even when he's sort of missing those kind of ambitious leaps of faith as a slide player. Where's my slide? Fuck, where is it? I've got no idea where that's gone. It's rolled off somewhere. I wonder if I can do it with this microphone. I best unplug it first. The right racket. Obviously it's a bit harder with a SM58 microphone. You know, so actually not a bad impression really. He's aiming for those sort of there it is. You know, he's having to get halfway up his fretboard with a slide. He's missing it. Sometimes he's not getting high enough, and sometimes he's flying straight past it. It's rough and ready, and it's that thing of it not being about the notes and being about the spaces in between and the attitude that you play it with. The wrong note played with enough conviction is the right note, but he's kind of, even when he's doing like even when he's in the studio and he has like presumably a million opportunities to overdub stuff, he's settling for the stuff that really excites on account of it, you know, being on the edge of failure. It's awesome. That's the kind of guitar playing that makes people like me want to do rock and roll. So it's awesome stuff, and obviously it was a hit. I think mainly because the riff is just so, it's easy to sing along to. Literally anybody can do it. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So there you have it. Justin Hawkins writes again and again. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and watch one of these two videos. By the way, I was wearing white trousers. Yeah. Oh, ignore the little flip-flops. That's not a although maybe that's what they should have done. They should have gone for the red shirt, white trousers, little flip-flops. See you on the ice.